Immigration lawyer Ashraf Essop says dealing with failures in the South African migration system would have been avoided, and we could have avoided, I should say, the Sheperd Bushiri saga. Now the country depends on international law to bring Bushiri back, with the Hawks issuing a red notice with Intepol to have them arrested. Immigration lawyer Ashraf Essop joins us now to talk to us about the issue that is now in our hands. Good to have you. Thanks very, very much for being with us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
You point out a number of failures in the system that really should not have happened. Talk us through some of your observations in this case.
Well, just judging by the facts that are in the media and not having any of the facts available, it appears that the following has happened. That the suspect had entered into the Republic sometime in 2016 and miraculously got his permanent residence permit in the same year. Now, if we take into account that there are certain channels before you obtain permanent residence, then it'd be interesting to know what those channels were. For example, if there was a work visa, which the minister alluded to yesterday, that certain members of the churches are granted blanket waivers and a work visa is extended. If that was the route, then indeed you had to wait 5 years before you could even apply for permanent residence. So we can count that out. Let's assume that the Bushiris had started an own business. Then the requirements there were that they had to bring in 5 million rand in capital and invest it in a business, which had to be underwritten by the DTI. And the DTI looks for 3 principal inputs. 1 is the sustainability, 2 is the job creation, and 3 is the skills transfer. So again, it's a mystery to us on what basis the permanent residence was extended. But let's be gracious and say the minister has accepted that it was granted in error. Now, understand that what he's saying is that the applicant fraudulently made a statement on his application, but he says the department granted it in error. The department didn't say it was fraudulent itself. So that's one of the failures of the system, that your permit could appear on the system, but the underlying documentation is not readily available for anyone to make an immediate assessment. The second thing that appears to have happened is that the Bushiris were not charged recently in August 2020. They were charged previously. When a foreigner is charged with any offense, one of the things the criminal justice system does before they grant him bail is the paperwork, and the Department of Home Affairs has to give an affidavit regarding the validity of the permit. It's usually in the form of an affidavit called Section 212. So then the court takes that into account, says, look, we have another problem here. Not only are you charged with count A, but on count B, you are an illegal foreigner. Now, the consequences of being an illegal foreigner is that you are liable for detention and deportation. But you have a right to appear in a court within 48 hours. That was recently extended.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're telling us right now, and this is what's so worrisome about this particular case, is that from what you're saying, it's almost impossible for a normal, average person who has come into South Africa to get, as you say, permanent residence within a year, face the justice system and not get deported. Do you suspect that there may be some helping hand behind the scenes, that this has been more of an inside job than what we could possibly do, because any normal person coming in could never, ever escape the rules that South Africa has in place? These are the country's laws, and yet it seems like Sheperd Bushiri and his wife have escaped all the laws of South Africa.
Look, there's 3 possible explanations for his escape. He is indeed a man of miracles, and he's proved it. B, he is better than Houdini. Or C, as the minister says, he had some help. So we have to take our pick. But to be more serious, indeed, it is South Africa's laws, immigration laws, are extremely comprehensive. And it's very, very unusual for the department to get it wrong. How did the department not react when the children left, for example, a few days before? And why are we assuming that the suspects left on Friday last week, Friday the 13th, which is apparently unlucky to do anything on that day? He could have left any time between Monday and Friday when he had to report. So he had a whole week to report, and anything could have happened. But with regard to the children, it's interesting to note, if they were minors, they needed the permission of their parents in an affidavit before they were let out of the airport. Now, did that happen? Remember, there was the debacle of unabridged birth certificates, etc. That has now been ironed out. But you still need permission for a minor to travel. In whose custody were the minors? What documentation did they bring? More worrying, if the Bushiri's permanent residence was suspected to have been irregular, and there was a legal challenge to that, we understand that there was a procedural or substantive defect, and that matter was taken on review, and apparently the court then said, no, we have to wait until the criminal charges have been adjudicated. Then in that case, why were the children's permanent residence not flagged? Now, there is a thing called Movement Control Register at the airport, and it captures every single person's entry and exit into the Republic.
How do we know? How would we know that they actually used an airport? Because what we're getting from the Home Affairs Department is they're saying that the Bushiris never left through any port of entry in and out of South Africa, and that is worrying, because that just shows you how porous our borders are. And the minister actually admitted to it yesterday. But we're just assuming that they went through an airport, not they, but their children. We don't actually know how they left the country, and that is the biggest concern.
Indeed, and I think there's many questions that need to be answered, but I don't think we have all the answers right now. But credit to the Department of Home Affairs. When they heard or had news that he might be leaving via Waterkloof military air base, they deployed their best. The acting director general, Mr. Jackie McKay, was present in person. They searched the plane for 7 hours. Now, it's unlikely that the plane leaving at 3:30 on schedule will be used by the Bushiris because his deadline was 6 p.m. to report. Why would you search a plane before 6 p.m. and not at 6 p.m.? There's too many unanswered questions here. But I think the state indeed tried. I think they deployed the Hawks. They tried. They went to ORT. What is not clear is the following. If I'm at Waterkloof Air Force Base and I'm refused permission to board the flight, and I'm told, go to ORT and meet the flight there and I'll board you through the VIP lounge, and then suddenly 3 people don't pitch up. They went shopping on a Friday night between Waterkloof and ORT. Again, it just doesn't make sense. Lots of questions, and I think a very, very deep investigation is necessary.
It is. We've got the minister coming up, in fact, in a short while. I just want one last question to you, please, sir, and if you can keep the answer quite short. If we look at, in terms of the litigation and extradition now and how that's going to work, because it's almost, to a certain extent, out of our hands into Malawi's hands now to ensure that they will assist us to bring the Bushiris back. What's actually going to happen?
Extradition is driven by treaty, and treaty is driven by governments. So it needs government-to-government intervention and respect for the SADC protocols, whatever they are in place. Secondly, he is a suspect in this country, not in that country. It may or may not behove the Malawi government to turn him over. We've heard that he could have traveled to a third country, which makes the Intepol red alert quite nonsensical. He traveled out of South Africa without a passport, apparently, and without a port of entry. Nothing prevents him from leaving and going to another country. The Malawi government might say, he's not here. Then what do we do? Where do we find him?
Lots of unanswered questions. We've got the minister, as I say. Ashraf, we really appreciate your time and insight into this. It's certainly going to help us talking to the minister after this, so we can just speak with a little bit more authority when it comes to the law surrounding something like this. Ashraf Essop is an attorney specializing in immigration, giving us that perspective on our migration system. Let's take a break. When we return, we've got your news headlines. We've also got some sports news and that minister interview that'll be coming up about the same issue around the Bushiri. Stay tuned.